I'm past the point of return, it's for the legacy. You know the road can feel cold, but this my destiny. No more pretending or tripping over excuses. Temper flare, need to take it out on music. On a mission to be prolific, my objective is quite specific.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Resilient Man Project. I'm Jonathan York. I'll be your guide on this journey to resilience. We have a special guest today. I met him about a month ago. We had dinner at an event up in St. Louis, and man, for me, connection is rare. We had just a really deep conversation. I feel like it stuck with me. Jason Mackenzie. He is the Ames Leadership Institute founder. He's involved in some accelerator program with the Dad Edge Alliance, and he's a friend. Thanks for coming on, Jason.
Hey, man, happy to be here. Looking forward to this.
Yeah, man. Like I was saying, our conversation just stuck with me when we had it. I'm always hesitant to reach out because I'm asking people to kind of go back into some places that they don't want to go, and I just feel like it's so important that people that have been through things and learned things and came out on the other side in a good place. I just think it's important that we share that journey, how we got there, so maybe we can help somebody that's going through something similar. So, you want to just pick it up, man? Just tell us your story a little bit and where you are now and what you got going on.
Yeah, for sure, man. I mean, I could just go on a bit of a monologue, so I probably won't. But I think your hesitation. I mean, I understand it on one sense, but I think after some time and space has passed, and for me personally, and I think for a lot of people, and I think for you too, right? As you realize, as we talk more about the stuff that we've been through, not only is that part of the healing process and putting it into context, but it's also just a massive opportunity to help other people. Because the older I get, I'm 49, the older I get, the more I realize that, man, life is long and there are plenty of opportunities and variables, for things to go sideways, for you to be hit with things you never expected, difficult challenges that you don't know how to handle, and you got to muddle your way through it. Some of them can hurt like hell. And I think we're all just, I've probably said this to you when we met, but, I think so many people, or one of the things I've learned is people are just waiting for somebody else to go first, man. So we all walk around wanting to pretend like we got it together, we know what we're doing, and a lot of times we don't. And I think being willing to just say, yeah, either I've been in a place that was, way super hard, and I didn't know what the hell I was doing, or, man, I don't know what I'm doing right now, and I could use some help, is a profoundly connecting act with other people. So, yeah, I'm glad you did reach out, is basically my long-winded way of saying that. So, yeah, but I'll tell you just real quick, and, we can elaborate or take it wherever you want. So, the short version of a long story is really my wife, my first wife and the biological mother of my kids, committed suicide. I guess it was about 12 and a half years ago now. So it was March of 2010. And leading up to that moment, that moment was obviously incredibly difficult, but leading up to it was really hard too, right? She was dealing with pretty profound, devastating mental health challenges due to lots of things, but trauma she experienced as a kid, and I'm sure trauma she saw on the job as a police officer for a number of years, and all these things, right? They all compounded, I'm sure, and so. After the birth of our second daughter, there was, as I look back with the benefit of hindsight, there was, we were together for 16 years. As I look back with the benefit of hindsight, there was lots of red flags but I just didn't have the life experience. I was a lot younger then. I didn't have the life experience to really understand them or piece them together. And honestly, I wanted my life to be good. So there's probably some things for sure there were some things I ignored or, tried to make the best of it, I suppose. And so the 5 years leading up to her death were really a roller coaster / nightmare of a never ending spiral of mental health issues, So, yeah. And I mean, it was really challenging, right? So I didn't know how to cope with that, man. Like, you mentioned the Dad Edge Alliance, right? Which you're a part of. And I mean, it's an amazing group of guys supporting each other. I mean, this was started happening before social media was even a thing. I mean, just before social media was a thing. I didn't know any of these. These things didn't. I mean, I'm sure they existed to a certain extent, but I didn't know about them. And I never even considered that they were a thing. So I really did a lot of it, try to navigate a lot of it alone, right? And I didn't have the life skills or the emotional intelligence to be able to understand my own emotions or understand what was happening or reach out and ask for help. And so I just started drinking, right? So I ended up developing a pretty severe drinking problem that went on for quite a while, and a while after her death. So, I mean, I'll stop there. I've been sober for 8 years. But yeah, man, it was an incredible journey that I've gone through a lot of different phases of how I think about it, between then and now.
That right there really resonates. It's amazing the way that you view things change over time, and then change again over more time, and then change again over more time. There's a lot of truth to that for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
So going back to when everything happened, and you went through some things like professionally too during that time, right? And you had some other hurdles that you were overcoming.
Yeah, well, I mean, I did, in the sense that I was drinking a lot, first of all. So I was in this relatively senior leadership position. I actually had a great job. I was traveling all over the world, and at that time it was the automotive industry. I don't know if it's like this now. I think it's less like this now, but just tons of drinking. You'd go on these business trips and it would just be a friggin' shit show, man, of boozing it up. And so, I mean, that contributed to, I was already drinking anyway, to deal with all the other stuff. And so that just it was not a great environment for me to be in. And so I had gotten promoted to a leadership position that I didn't have the skills to handle. I didn't have the emotional intelligence to handle. And, I did some things fairly well, but I ended up getting demoted through that whole time. And I mean, that turned out to be, again, at the time, it was a massive slap in the face that I should have been able to see coming, to looking back again with the benefit of hindsight and some maturity. But it was a massive slap in the face. So it was just one more thing on top of everything else that was going on that made it a little bit more challenging to deal with. So again, turns out it was a great lesson and ended up serving me in the long run. But it took me a while to be able to recognize that and process it and come to terms and recognize my own role in contributing to the situation rather than just blaming my boss who demoted me.
Yeah. The post that I read where you talked about the apartment and all those things, when was that in all this timeline? Yeah.
So what happened there is, so again, to maybe set a little context, before my wife before mental illness struck her down, I thought I had it all figured out, man. I had this great job. She was a police officer, which, depending on where you live, like in Canada, a police officer is a pretty highly respected and well-paid job. So I know that's not like that everywhere, but it really is here. And so, we were set in my mind. We had a nice house and we had a pool, and we were in our early 30s and had 2 young kids. And I mean, in my mind, I had it. Yeah, man, traveling around the world on this expense account and all this stuff. And in my mind, I had the formula figured out. You just keep doing this stuff. I'll get promoted further and further up the company. The houses will get bigger. The cars will get nicer. The stuff I own will get better. And I mean, that's it, man. I've cracked the code at 32 or whatever it was. And what ended up happening was, through the course of Cindy, my first wife, her mental health issues, I mean, some of the ways that played out were a lot of incredible spending, man. Spending us to near bankruptcy a bunch of times. We're talking tens and tens and tens of thousands of dollars just blown. Trying
to make her feel happy, or is that the thought behind it?
I don't know that I don't know, man. It
gives you something to focus on, kind of thing.
It's more like out of control so when people are, manic, let's say, they do everything they do is just to this massive extreme. So they whether it's, it can be drug addiction, it could be sexual recklessness, it can be, just rage, it can be, again, massive spending. So it's really not about, it's not really about happiness. It's more about this delusions of grandeur. Yeah. So I don't think I would quantify it or describe it as trying to be happy, but so make a long story short, we ended up separating, a little while before she died. She threw me out of the house. And so I ended up moving into this really shit townhouse, that was, in my mind, a massive step down. I mean, looking at it, I guess superficially, it was a massive step down, man. Like it was humiliating for me. I felt like I took just such a huge step backwards. And she was still living in our house because I was paying the mortgage because, number one, my name was on the mortgage and she wouldn't move, and I cared about her a lot. Right. And I'm like, man, I don't know what will happen if I stop paying the mortgage. Like I don't think she's not really capable of taking care of herself, and so I'm paying the mortgage and and I just, yeah, it was super humiliating, man. I'm now living in this dumpy townhouse. But as I said in that post the other day, my kids didn't care. They didn't care at all. It meant nothing to them. And so that was a really eye-opening experience for me, right? That really impacted me. It changed the way I look at the world, even to this day. And I'm sure it will continue for the rest of my life, which is, changing my relationship with material things, for example, not feeling this this need to keep up with the Joneses or measure my level of success by the things that I own or the size of my house. So again, there's another one of those things that while immensely challenging at the time, turned out to be a huge gift. So that's a common theme among most of these things that have happened.
Yes, sir. It is. That's awesome. So you want to speak to, so now you're, 5 or 6 years past it and you're kind of rebounding or whatever you want to say. You want to kind of speak to that time in your life?
Yeah, sure. So, really what happened was I continued to drink so I got remarried, and in my mind, having gone through this really traumatic experience, I had to sit my kids down who were 5 and 6 and tell them their mom was dead. Right. I mean, it was a horrible, horrible thing to have to do. And I did not appreciate how impactful that was for me. I mean, it's now been 12 years, and I think I still sometimes realize how impactful it has been to me. So I remarried, and in my mind, I was done. I had moved on. I had built this new life. It was a testament to how great I am as a person and all that stuff, but I was still drinking, man. And so as I probably about 4 years, it was a little over 4 years. And my new wife, Tanya, amazing woman who is a huge part of the journey that took me to
all have one, brother.
Oh yeah, man. She was starting to get upset with me about drinking and, not really, we were not near divorce or anything like that, but she was starting to say like, hey, like this ain't going to be my life, man. Like, showing some concern and starting to draw some boundaries, I would say. And what ended up happening was, my 9-year-old at the time, who is 17 now, almost 18, I was supposed to take her out for a daddy-daughter date. And this is what I had promised her. My wife was out with our older daughter, and I just got drunk, man, just completely trashed. And she ended up telling me how disappointed she was in me at 9 years old. And so that was definitely the lowest point. But at the same time, it was it turned out to be one of the greatest gifts I ever received, man, because it just whatever, it was from the right thing to hear from the right person at the right time. And it just like, boom, my eyes just opened and I stopped drinking. So, but what was interesting was when I stopped drinking, that's when I actually realized, I came to realize why I was drinking in the first place. Like for any of your audience who is interested in the subject of sort of addiction and trauma, I don't know if you've heard of Gabor Mate, but he's this like Canadian doctor, and he is just an amazing guy. And one of the things he says is behind addiction, there's always pain, man, always pain. And as I sobered up and I gave myself some time and space. I started to realize how much pain was blocked up inside me, and I started to grieve my wife's death, and it was really freaking painful, man. And it happened
how many years post?
Well, I stopped drinking about 4 years and a bit after, but probably about 5 or 6 months after I stopped drinking is when I started to go through this process of, I started to feel all kinds of anxiety and, but also just deep sadness and pain and emotional pain, and like started to visit her grave a lot more. And I started to write about her and all this stuff. And it was my wife who said, like I said, God, I feel like I'm going crazy. Like, do you find this weird that I'm talking and writing about Cindy all the time? And she goes, no, idiot, you're grieving. And it was like, honestly, man, yeah, man. Well, I thought grieving was, probably up until that moment, I thought grieving was something weak people did. You know what I mean? Like while strong people just got up and got on about, going about their business. And so I was, that allowing myself to experience that finally, that was profoundly healing. And it allowed me to, as we kind of talked about at the beginning, it allowed me to start changing how I looked at what happened to me, and it wasn't just this. I spent a lot of time in victim mode, right? Where I really liked when people would say, oh, Jay, God, I would tell people what happened and they'd be like, oh, you're so strong. How did you get through that? And blah, blah, blah. Like a normal response. But I needed that, right? I needed to have somebody validate my pain I had been in, Yes. But as I started to grieve, I started to think, yeah, I don't know, man. Like it's part of the grieving process was, like we also talked about at the beginning, was starting to talk to people about what I had been through, whether it was the drinking, and not from the perspective of looking for somebody to, again, validate my pain. It was more like, man, I started actually talking about not stopping drinking and what that has been like. And so I started to talk to people about, other people who were drinking. Like I was just starting to be more open about it. And so over time, what happened was I went from this moment or this experience that I thought was just completely tragic and dark and awful to then saying, you know what, I'm actually helping a lot of people in ways that I wouldn't have otherwise been able to. And so while, yeah, sure, it was still a tragedy, man, like it's also a gift in some way, in the sense that it's actually helping me lead a different and maybe even more meaningful life, So.
Oh man, that hits. The way I say it is, and I refer to my mom's life like this because if people hear, her story of the mother she was, or even the person that she was, or the life that I had with, their natural, things, like you said, kind of not poor Jonathan or whatever, but I had that shift a couple of years ago, and it was just the shift of I almost view it as her life as something beautiful. I mean, as crazy as that sounds, because it took that to get me here, It was almost like, I view it as sacrificial almost,
Yeah. Did you have what caused you to make that shift in perspective? Like, was it gradual, or did you have this moment of understanding, or?
Me and my wife went through kind of a rough time, and some things were not in the heat of the moment, but we were able to sit down and have this conversation, and some things were said that really kind of rocked me to my core. And then I went on a out of town job for a month in a hotel room, basically by myself. And man, I just did this internal, just this deep dive, and through that experience and so through other things, I had this shift of that, and then there's also the shift of out of victimhood into purpose, that it was all for a reason. It was all to prepare me for what's coming. Don't view it as anything more, anything sad or anything anymore. It was what was necessary to get me here, right? Because this is what I'm supposed to do. That's how I see it now. So.
Yeah, man. What a much more empowering way of looking at it. I think too, we often, I don't know if I was telling you the story when we met about my grandmother and all that. Was I telling you that whole continuum thing? So maybe I'll just talk about it anyways. But when I look at, it's very easy to judge the people who have come before us, right? Especially if they've hurt us. And so my grandmother was a good example of this, right? So she was she was not very nice to my mom. I would say, like kind of like she was just kind of mean to her, and she belittled her and stuff, and wasn't really not the worst mom, but like certainly not the best mom. And I think my mom still has, even though she's in her 70s and still has some self-esteem issues to this day related to that. Excuse me. And so when she died in 2006, I remember thinking at the time, like, I mean, she was always nice to us. Like she was she spoiled us and all that stuff. But I remember when she died, I remember thinking, she wasn't a very nice person anyway, and so whatever. I didn't really care that much. But as I've gotten older, I just think about it differently. Like, and it's through, I think, a much more compassionate lens. So when I look at her life, she was born in 1920. She was born in northern Quebec. So I'm from Canada. So it's a province of kind of like a state in the in the U.S., but way up north on a Indian reserve. Very, very rough, man. Like really remote. Her mom died when she was 8. It was brutal, man. A brutal, poor, remote upbringing through the Depression, brutal, man. Like brutal in a way that I can't even imagine brutal. So when I look at her life, I then look at her. She got married to a good man, and they raised 3 kids. And so while my mom did not have the best upbringing, the upbringing that my grandmother provided her was a hell of a lot better than the one that my grandmother had. And so my mom raised me. She took what she was given and moved the ball down the field a bit. And she gave me a better upbringing. Not perfect. Like, of course, no parent is perfect, man. But she gave me a better upbringing than I had. And so now I've tried to do the same. And so when I look at it that way, everybody is part of this this upward trajectory. Everybody has a place on this upward trajectory. And I think that's a way more compassionate and realistic and ultimately liberating way to look at it, right? Because instead of going around blaming the people that have done you wrong, and again, some parents have done horrible things to their kids, man. Like, I'm not in any way trying to minimize that, but the question is, I think one of the greatest gifts that we've been bestowed on, that's been bestowed to us, whether you think it's by the universe or God or whatever, is our ability ultimately to choose how we look at what has happened to us, what is happening to us right now, and what we want to happen to us, man. And so there's some ways some ways of doing that, like of looking at things, cause people to victimize themselves over and over, and others are a lot more liberating and empowering. And changing the way you look at something, I'm not saying it's like flipping a switch, but I think it's really freaking hard, actually, especially if you've been looking at something a certain way for a long time. And at the same time, just knowing that it's possible, I think plants the seed of change. It might take a while to germinate that seed. But again, knowing it is possible to change how you view those things, I think, is an important first step sometimes.
Yeah, I agree with that. And that's cool the way that you kind of put the trajectory of the family, because, that's kind of, what we all say about, becoming a better man, just a little bit, try to be a little bit better the next day. And really kind of, you can, like you said, put your family on that same type of trajectory, right? And be the change and progress your family, so hopefully your kids can take it to the next level, and we can get this world back on track,
100%.
Kind of go into some of the healing inner work type of stuff. You want to go into a little bit of that?
Yeah, man. Sure thing.
I'm fascinated by this. This is like,
yeah, me too. Yeah, me too. So, yeah, I think probably to maybe set up this part, I think what's really interesting is, like I said, it's been about 12 years since she passed away, and I still have these moments or these realizations of how that whole experience has affected me, and it's not like I'm walking around in like grief all the time. I hardly ever think about it. Right. I mean, my life is wonderful and I'm really happy. And it's not something that comes up in my mind, my head or my heart very often at all. However, there's still these moments where it does, and it's what that looks like has been different over the years. So, as I think as I have started the healing process. So again, the first part was, I don't remember. So once I stopped drinking, one of the things I did was actually, when I stopped drinking, I didn't do anything other than not drinking. I really didn't do anything different. Right. So after about like 3-4 months of not drinking, I remember actually being kind of worried, like nothing magical has happened here. Like I'm not drinking and, but I'm still basically, other than, not being drunk and not being hungover, I'm still the same person. I started to get worried. Like, am I already at the peak of my capabilities here, man? Like, this is like, what the hell? And then so what I would do is I wake up early. I'm usually a pretty early riser, and I would wake up early in the morning, and dude, my Facebook feed was filled with like all kinds of political crap. Like, and I would just wake up every morning and I'd read this and I'd start the day mad. And so I wasn't hungover, but I'd start the day because the world is so far away from the way I want it and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, so I was listening to this political podcast one time and just the guy, like serendipity, whatever you want to call it. I'm coming to the point where I don't really believe in coincidence anymore, but this guy had on this guest, completely nothing to do with politics. And it was this dude named Hal Elrod who wrote this book called The Miracle Morning that a lot of people have heard of. But basically the gist of it was he was talking about doing a morning routine, and how important that was, like writing and maybe meditating and visualizing. And I remember hearing this, man, and I was like, what the hell? Like, this sounds like, yeah, whatever, man. Like, this sounds ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then I remember thinking, well, and he was like, just try it for 30 days. And I remember thinking, well, I hate the way I'm starting my morning anyway. Like, there's got to be a better way to go about starting my morning. So, you know what? I'll just try it. What the hell? What do I have to lose? And it's not like, I started doing this and the clouds parted and like a beam of light shone down from the heavens. But what I did notice was that starting my day in a positive way with some wins, what I noticed was it started actually impacting how I interacted with people throughout the day. And that was really surprising to me, actually. And so, I started talking to people about it. I'm like, you're going to think this is like, I was working in an automotive plant. It could not have been more blue collar, man. Like, right. I mean, I was a relatively senior leader, so I was like management and, I started talking to people on the shop floor about it. And I started having these really cool conversations with people. And so I started listening to this guy's podcast, and this is sort of where I got into the world of personal, like, quote, personal development, which I thought was a cult. I thought Tony Robbins was some kind of cult leader up until that point, man.
Yeah.
So, and I think it was just through doing some of that stuff, and that was really helpful. So understanding more about emotional intelligence and talking to other people was really, really helpful. And then I started doing a podcast called Mental Health Wars. So I'll go into all the things, but for me, one of the biggest parts of the healing process was the service to other people, like trying to find ways, just talking to people, not necessarily formally, but talking to people about my experience and creating a space for them to talk to me about theirs was really healing. Because number one, it helped me get stuff out of my own head, which is never a good place to keep it, right? Because it's amazing how you can have some really nutty ideas in your own head that make a lot of sense to you, and when you say them out loud, they sound really dumb, right? Yeah. So I always tell people, if you're not sure if something's a good idea or something you're doing is a good idea or not, say it out loud in the form of a sentence, and if it sounds really freaking stupid, it probably is, right? But so that was part of it. Seeing a therapist was part of it. I mean, that was actually a really powerful experience for me, man, because so one of the impacts this whole thing has had on me is So I've always been a motivated person, I would say, like a pretty motivated person, but I became driven to the point of absurdity almost in a way. And
that addiction piece and plugged it in there.
Yeah, that was definitely part of it. And, but also, and I don't mean driven like, so I was never driven to the point of like sacrificing my family. It wasn't that. It was driven in the sense that I never was doing anything to the level that I thought I should be. And I would take on too many things and not do any of them well enough. And I remember talking to my wife one time, and I was saying, like, I don't know why I'm like this, because I'm pretty sure that I didn't used to be like this. And so I actually was thinking it must have, this was about maybe 3 years ago. I remember thinking, because it has good impacts too, right? I mean, I'm able, I have a couple businesses, and like, it's not like it's all bad, but at the same time, I remember thinking I have to be able to create a positive impact in the world without torturing myself like this. It has to be possible, man. Like, come on. Right. And so, she said, why don't you see a therapist? And I'm like, yeah, that's a really good idea. And so I didn't go see a therapist from the place of like, oh, I'm like broken and screwed up. I went to the therapist from the perspective of, I want to understand why I'm actually like this, and to see if I can figure out if there's a better way to go about it. It's more really just from a place of curiosity, actually. And what was really interesting was I remember talking to the therapist about this letter. So about 4 years ago, I want to say, maybe 3 years, about 4 years ago now, I found this letter that my older daughter, who was just about to turn 19, that she had written to her dead mom. And dude, it was emotionally intelligent beyond belief for a 15-year-old. I was shocked by how thoughtful and articulate and heartfelt it was, but it was absolutely heartbreaking, man. Like just heartbreaking. And oh my God, I was at work when I found it. And I just locked myself in a room and basically sobbed for 30 minutes. And I was so freaking mad at her mom for killing herself. And which is just, and I'd actually not really ever been angry with her until that moment. Like, but that was, I was like,
that pain she caused your daughter.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I don't know. I never really had been, but at that moment I was super mad. So anyways, I was telling the therapist about this, and he said, what do you think the underlying emotion was behind that anger? Because anger is usually a secondary emotion, right? So like for guys, if a guy feels scared or feels insecure or feels helpless, oftentimes that manifests itself as anger. So part of emotional intelligence is being able to like peel back the onion and say, what's actually at the root of this thing, man? Right?
Yeah.
And so for me, as I thought about it, I said, I think it's helpless. I think it's helpless. And the reason is because like the frustration of being helpless, because I can't fix this for her. It's not even my job. Like, it's not even my job to fix it. It's not even like there's anything to fix, right? It's just that she's had this experience and she's on this journey, and I'm here. My job as her dad is to support her, but it's not like I can take a screwdriver to it and like fix some broken part. That's not how it works. So and I can't force her to heal or anything. This is her individual journey, man. And but when he asked me that question, I said helpless. And then I said to myself, when I started talking about the helpless thing, I said, it's interesting because as I look back to those 5 years where her mental health issues were just so extreme, we're talking, she went from being like a cop to being in rehab, being in homeless shelters, being locked up in a psych ward, getting electroshock therapy and having like all her short-term memory wiped out, to spending us near bankruptcy, to like moving away leaving me with 2 young kids for like 4 months, just boom, gone, like all this stuff. So, but I said, the most pervasive emotion I felt during that time was helplessness too. Like I was like I was like a ship, like a bottle bobbing in like this stormy sea. And I had very little control over a lot of parts of my life. And then I was like, you know what, man? Also, when I was drinking, like when I was an addict, that was one of the most pervasive emotions I felt because I'm trying to quit this thing and I can't. I mean, anybody who's been addicted to something, typically, I would imagine, tries to quit it about 1 million times before they finally do. Yeah, right. And so I was like, man, and so as I'm thinking about this, I'm like, holy shit! Like for the last, for a good chunk of the last 10 years, I am helpless. Like the idea of feeling helpless is one of the most important aspects of my life. And so what I realized is this, in this moment, was this drive, this always needing to do more and setting these high standards actually comes from, or was stemming from this being terrified of ever being helpless again. You know what I mean? Like, so I'm going to control everything. I'm going to do more. I'm going to have more irons in the fire. Obviously that's a fool's errand, man, because that'll never end, right? There's always another thing to do, another standard to set, another thing to control. And so that was really a impactful moment. So I would say, like, talking to a therapist, and again, from the perspective of just being genuinely curious about what's going on. But this insight happened 10 years after she died, man, 10 years. So, and I had done all this personal development work and all this crap, like, and it had made me a way better person. But to understand that after all that, like, work on myself, to realize that, holy crap, there was this thing, this belief, this fear that had been, like, really guiding my life in a significant way that I wasn't even aware of, was like a really eye-opening experience, man. Wow. Just to the complexities of what makes us human. So I'd say therapy was part of it. Psychedelics were also a big part of it, man. That's been a really, like, again, I'm not advocating for psychedelics. I'm just, but for me, it's been
doctors, do your own research, all that crap. We're just talking about ours.
But that's been a super powerful thing for me too, man. Is just
I've heard a lot, man, about that. Just, I'm not going to go down the political road of what I think things are the way they are around that type of stuff, but there's good that can a lot of things for sure.
Yeah, well, so I did this pretty intense mushroom trip a couple of years ago. It's probably about was it last year? I guess it might have been last year, actually. I think it was at the beginning of 2021. And what ended up happening was, I was down here actually just in the basement, and I'm sitting there, and basically what happened was, one of the ways that I used to try to control, like one of the biggest ways that I tried to control everything about myself was my physique. So, and it wasn't from a like a vanity thing. It was about, if I am jacked, basically, and ripped, I got my shit together. So my body is this thing that is fully in my control, right? And so, but what I would do is I would, like, torture myself about it, man. I'm like 49, like, you know what I mean? I'm not like 22, Right. And so I would do all these things, and I would try all these crazy diets, and I would always have all these crazy standards for myself. And it was just like, it was too much, man. And so what ended up happening was I did a freaking crazy dose of mushrooms. And as I'm sitting in the basement, and what actually happened was, the guilt and shame, I think, from maybe some of the ways that I couldn't save Cindy, but also just for always setting standards for myself. Like, on the outside, people would see me as a super, most people would see me as a pretty high performer. But in my own mind, I'm constantly setting standards that I'm not achieving. So I'm actually failing constantly, right? Yes. And it's
yes.
And so what happened was this guilt and this shame about all of this stuff. And actually, I'm sitting in the basement, and it actually, like, physically separates from my body. Like, so I'm sitting in the room, and I can see this, I don't know what you would call it, but it was like this sort of ethereal presence. Like, it had some type of shape to it. But anyways, but the point is that I could see that in this moment, I had such absolute clarity that guilt and shame that I would always put on myself were actually completely separate from me. They're not me. They're separate from me. And I said to myself, just fuck off, man. I don't need you anymore. And they basically just dissipated into a billion crystals, this whatever this thing was, and it was gone. And I'll tell you, man, it's been like about 2 years since that happened. I'm so much more chill about that stuff, man. Like, it's crazy how helpful
The realization how temporary all this stuff is.
Yeah, and that I have power over it. It's not, I'm not a slave. It doesn't have power over me. I have all the power. And so just this incredibly intense psychedelic experience just allowed me to see that or get clarity on it in a way I hadn't been able to before. And so like 2 years later, it's still like I'm way more chill. And unsurprisingly, I haven't fallen apart as a person. I'm not like some bag of shit. You know what I mean? Like, I still work out hard. But I just think about it a lot differently. So I think the main message though is that the healing from trauma and is really multifaceted, man. There's lots of different avenues to explore, and I think we should just open our minds to all of them, you know. And sometimes it's going to be messy, as like this year, 12 years. I haven't cried at my wife's grave for probably 5 years. This year I always go with the kids on or about the anniversary of her death. I just completely. I don't like the word broke down because it makes it sound like you're broken somehow. So, but I just
released, released, right?
Yeah.
Like,
oh my God. Yeah.
That's
and
how
get
it moved.
Yeah. And why then? I don't know. I have no idea. It doesn't even matter really, but it's fascinating that, and it created a really, powerful connecting moment for me and my kids, to be able to just see their dad be just real, man, and so, yeah, it's really it's complex.
A few minutes ago, I got to tell you said something that gave me like this epiphany, this big realization that I just had. And our good friend Nick Sotelo told me, like, when I was kind of getting all this stuff started, he said that he thinks that he's not that I'm not resilient now, but he said he thinks that this is my path to true resilience. And I didn't really understand what he meant, I don't think, until now. And I think this is my path to healing. I think this is my service. Like, I'm trying to heal myself through Resilient Man, on top of some other things that I'm obviously hoping to do. I just kind of had the realization, I think, that I'm doing this to heal myself as well.
Oh, 100%, man. So I'm curious, what does it feel like I got goosebumps there, buddy. What does it feel like to have that realization?
Just like another, turbo pack on my, just another driving force, but I know that I'm just getting started on this inner work and this understanding and all this stuff. And I don't know, I'm scared and excited to go down the path, but that's a cool. I had never had that thought until 10 minutes ago or whatever.
And it's funny, right? Because once you have these realizations, isn't it just so unbelievably obvious that, of course, this is part of your path to healing?
Yeah.
But I think one of the things I've learned, man, is that things take as long as they take to become clear. And sometimes it takes an unbelievably weirdly long time for something to become, for us to have some big realization about something. But I mean, so sometimes what I would do is I would say, oh my God, I can't believe it took me that long to realize that. Like, what? But now I just think, it takes as long as it takes, man, and just be grateful when you get some, some newfound play.
I'm a man of faith. Faith is extremely important to me, and maybe he gives us the realizations when we're ready for them. When we've learned whatever we needed to learn from that state of mind previously. Now it's time to shift to this new one, and I feel the same thing about when you're in hard times and things like that. I tell people all the time, you'll get through it when you've learned everything that you're supposed to learn from it.
Yeah, for sure, man. And I think too, for people as they go on this healing journey, I think one of the things to realize is it is super annoying at times. And not only from the, like, sometimes it can be painful, but it's more like, I am so sick and tired of talking about this. Like, you'll have these moments where you're like, am I just some self-absorbed idiot who's, talking about this freaking thing that happened all these years ago still, And I think that's I think asking yourself that question is perfectly reasonable, and the answer is no. But at the same time, I think it's a reasonable thing. It will come up for people, and I think it can cause people to probably not want to continue doing the work, right? Because you do get I've probably talked about this subject. I mean, God, I can't even think about how many times I've talked about this with people, with either my wife, a therapist, with other people like you, or whatever, And but I think what happens is the way we talk about it changes. So I used to be really into the idea of, I used to talk about this. So for example, she was a police officer when she had her mental health issues. Cops tend to be pretty shitty with one another when you take a knee, let's say. So you're like part of this, you're part of this tribe. And then all of a sudden you can't do it. And then you're kind of ostracized, right? And seen as weak and all this stuff. And I mean, maybe it's changed a little bit, but back then that's how it was like. And so what I used to do was I used to talk about what happened in the context of the police and police culture. And so I did some, talks to police groups and stuff. And then I would think about it in terms of mental health, right? And so I, made this, group called Mental Health Warriors, and I had all these guys. And then I was like, I'm so sick and tired of, at first I was like, I'm so tired of talking about the cops, man. And I'm so tired of talking about mental health. And so, but I felt a lot of guilt about it, because I'm like, I would think, don't I have some obligation to continue to try to help people dealing with mental health issues? And so, transitioning into something new, I had guilt about it, right? But then I was like, I've done what I can do here, man. I've made a contribution. I've done what I can do, and now I want to help people in another way. And it's really about talking about the things that we're talking about, right? Which is just helping people understand, help people be able to look in the mirror more often and just do the inner work, whether it's related to actually healing from some trauma, or whether it's related to just trying to be a better dad and a better husband. Like, the answer, yeah, man. Yeah, better human being. The answer, I always tell people, and I heard this from someone, so I can't take credit for it, but, look in the mirror before you look out the window, right? We tend to, when there's things happening in our lives that we don't like, we tend to look all around us for all these causal factors, when usually it's us. And so helping people with that is something that's really, really interesting to me right now, right? So the journey the journey of service will change as you change as a person, which I think is amazing.
Yeah. Well said, brother. Well said. You want to get into a few things of everything that you got going on real quick, and then I'll let you get off of here. Yeah, man. Sure.
So, so one of the cool things that happened as part of this whole journey was, so one thing I will say to your audience is, you have ways right now of being of service to other people. I think one of the ways to lead a meaningful life is to just recognize that every one of us has a chance in every interaction to leave another person better off in some way, right? So, and that could be, it doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to be profoundly life-changing. It might be, making them laugh. It might be asking them a great question. It might be just creating space and listening to them without trying to fix it. It might be connecting them with someone that they would benefit from knowing. It might be offering a piece of advice if they want it, whatever. But, and so what happened was, really interestingly, is, I had started talking about this stuff a little bit. My wife called me up and she goes, there's this woman who's starting this podcast, and I think you should go be on it. I remember saying, what are you talking about? I mean, I thought I had listened to, I was listening to podcasts. Yeah. I thought this was the equivalent of being on, like NBC or something. You know what I mean? I'm like, I'm not going on a podcast. What are you talking about? I don't have anything to say. And she goes, no, you do have something to say. What are you talking about? Like, so she finally cajoled me into going on this podcast. And it was just a very small podcast. And, just a woman, just like you and like me, trying to make a positive difference in the world. Right. And so I went on our podcast, and it was actually like quite an enjoyable conversation. And I was like, I don't know, maybe I do have some things to say. And then that actually led me to be on another podcast. Somebody heard it. He goes, hey, cool story. You want to come on my podcast? And that guy introduced me to Larry, our mutual friend. And so he had this dad group, that you mentioned, the Dad Edge Alliance. It was very, very small. It was like 200 people. And I was like, well, I'm a dad. So I talked to him on the phone, and I said, yeah, I'd love to just jump in the group and add some value. And so I went in. It was a free group, add some value. And then about 6-8 months later, he goes, hey, do you want to run like a mastermind group with me? And I'm like, I thought, like, I had put him on this pedestal, man. He had this podcast. He sounded so smooth. And I'm like, like a mastermind with, I said, okay. But I was like, you want to talk? Yeah, I was like, you want to talk imposter syndrome, dude? I was like, what the hell? I'd hear this guy talking to guys, like selling them on the mastermind. I'm like, he's so smooth, man. And then after every mastermind call, it's like I'd be either thinking or I'd say to my wife, this is it. This is the last one. He's going to realize I have nothing to say. Like, I mean, we're talking complete and utter imposter syndrome. And so then at the end of the mastermind, we did this like kind of wrap up thing, like, hey, what'd you like? And like there's like 10 guys in there. And like 4 or 5 of the guys said like one of their most meaningful things was some shit I said to them. And I was like, wow. So then I was like, I don't know, maybe I can do this too. Right. So basically, to make a long story short, I've been running masterminds ever since with Larry and some other partners. So right now what we do is, and they have all kinds of different evolutions, but right now we run what's called the Dad Edge Accelerator, which is a mastermind for business dads who want to create extraordinary marriages, epic connections with their kids while they are continuing to run successful businesses. Because a lot of times business dads, I mean, as you know, it can be a freaking challenge, man. Right. So, and sometimes we can sacrifice the people. We can dedicate so much time and effort and energy and focus to our business that we sacrifice the people that we say we care about the most. And then we get this situation where maybe we create some business success and we're up to our neck and we want to continue to grow the business, but we can't figure out how to get out of it, man. Yeah. It's guys find themselves like they're like stuck, right? So we got a group of about 50 or so guys that are doing life with us that way. And it's just an amazing group of guys. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is me and my partner, Jeff Bowman, who we also is one of the partners of the accelerator. We've created what's called the Ames Leadership Institute. And really what the Ames Leadership Institute is all about, it's about going into companies and helping them expand their organizational capacity. So in other words, to make them better able to get things done. So it's like strategic capacity, leadership capacity, and operational capacity. But the way we do it is all based on something called appreciative inquiry, which could be another friggin' 10-hour conversation. But it's a super positive, strength-based way of looking at the world. So the work that we do, we don't only help companies, run better, but we help them, create an unbelievably positive culture and engage their people and bring out the best in their, so get results by bringing out the very, very best in their people. So that is also just super, super uplifting and positive work. So yeah, that's what I'm doing now, man. And I've got a daughter two daughters, and one of them just moved out of the house. So that's weird.
My daughter is going to find out, which I can say this because my daughter will find out tomorrow that she's getting engaged. I mean, that she's getting proposed to. So,
oh, really?
It's exciting.
Oh, God. So did her soon-to-be fiance come and ask for your permission?
Yeah, he did. Well,
that's
a while back, and then we've kind of had this thing planned for a while. So tomorrow's a big day, so it's gonna be cool.
Oh my God! So Dad approves, I'm assuming.
Oh, dude, yes, man.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Jackpot for sure.
That's awesome, man. That's such a good feeling. And when you see your kids, see them like you try to model being a good dad, right? I mean, that's just try to be the man that they'll expect in their life. And so when you see that kind of play out like that, like you see it, that's a great feeling, man.
Yeah, man. They give me some credit, but I don't really see how they turned out really freaking good. And my son, my daughter's just about to graduate nursing school. My son's air traffic controller in the Navy. And they had an insane childhood with all of my nonsense, and somehow they turned out. So I give their mother a lot of credit. But
I know we're going to wrap up, but I'll say one thing. So this is back on that whole, parents being on a continuum thing. One of the things I actually heard that was really impactful for me was I was listening to this. Tony Robbins maybe it's still on Netflix, but it was like this documentary called "I'm Not Your Guru," and it's really quite good. But there was a woman who stood up in the audience and at one of his events, and she was I don't remember exactly what she said, but she was basically like saying I had a terrible childhood and blah blah blah. And, she was probably about 40, and he said to her, what are some of the things that are good in your life now? Right? Because she's still really angry at her parents. And so she listed off all these things that are good in her life as well. And he goes, if you're going to blame your parents for the shit in your life, you have to give them credit for the things that are good in your life. It's not an either or, man. It's a both and, right? And I think that was when you think of your kids, did you do some shit? Yeah, I'm sure you did. But you know what? You also, where they're at today, you contributed to that, man. And so good on you.
Yeah, man. Well, brother, I sure appreciate you coming on. I had a blast. This was awesome.
Oh, me too. I really enjoyed it, man. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, it was cool.
All right, pal.
All right, guys. Another episode behind us. If you listen, if you would jump on Apple and follow, man, that would help me out. I'm a little behind on Apple. Spotify, follow as well. YouTube, if you like video, please follow. Every Wednesday morning at 4 a.m. We're on all the social media, Resilient Man Project. Find us. Appreciate you guys. Appreciate you, Jason.
You too, brother.
I'm past the point of return, it's for the legacy. The road can feel cold, but this my destiny. No more pretending or tripping over excuses. Temper flare, need to take it out on music on a mission.